Hey guys, I decided I'd join the club and do the walk and talk type video. What do you think? So we'll see how this works. I'm trying to get far enough away from my house so that my Wi-Fi does not interfere with the internet signal from the sky. Anyhow, and this is usually about the spot where I start to be able to do broadcast or listen to something on Facebook or something else. It's the magical zone of transference. I made a series of little short videos in another group, the current projects group. Some of you are members, and I was discussing like a deficit that I saw occurring in the play in that group. And what we've been doing mostly is trying a bunch of different games. We've been doing a bunch of one-shots. We've been transferring like GM roles. Some of them are little miniature campaigns, such as the Star Trek that CGA is running and doing a grand job of that, if I may say so. And I actually ended up, finally putting those thoughts together and making a YouTube video as well. But I wanted to discuss it here because I think this is a technique, or, the deficit points to a technique. And oddly enough, the technique is a player technique as opposed to a game master technique. Because most of what we tend to talk about ends up being game master techniques, because people like us, well, we are game masters. Oh, look. See, I'm walking around the schoolyard near my house, which I never go to because my children are old. So it'd be creepy if I was here during normal business hours now, wouldn't it? And so that technique, or the deficit I saw, was that the relationships between the characters were missing. That we all role-played our characters to a larger or a greater or lesser extent, but the relationships between the characters themselves were kind of flat. Now, I understand that, part of the deal with that is that, normally relationships between characters emerge during campaign play. That's just a kind of a natural, organic thing that happens. When that doesn't happen, and I'm sure we've all had experiences like that where it didn't happen, it's very sad. And that's sometimes when you realize I'm playing with the wrong people. But like, for example, in our All for One Regime Diabolique campaign, the original 4, we sat down, we kind of had a session 0. We got an idea of what the characters were going to be like. And so we sort of knew, stuff about the different fellows, what their shtick was, the monster hunter, the seducer, the young kid, the tortured noble. Anthony's always the tortured soul, which is great, with the magical aptitude. And so we kind of knew, but the personalities really emerged over time. The characters have continued to become richer and richer, and the relationships between them have become richer and richer. That's normal play. Likewise, in my Lamentations of Prussia game, we had no idea what the connections between the characters were going to be, except that we decided this is how they're going to meet, and we kind of went from A to B to C, sort of. We kind of had the basic idea. And then the relationships emerged because these guys were all just phenomenal role players and really kind of, pretty much I just gave them this really long leash and let them go. And it worked out great. So that's normal, organic play with engaged players who are engaged in each other's characters and in these relationships, not just role-playing their characters. But in something like, one-shot or short series, sometimes that you don't have time for that to happen, so you have to sort of help it along. It's funny because I went back and I looked at a bunch of videos I'd made on YouTube, which maybe I will link below for your enjoyment and for continued views. I don't care about that. But it's funny because it kind of catalogs my evolution about this topic. And I don't think that I've had a complete change of heart about this topic. I don't think I've changed my opinion. I think I've broadened my scope on fostering, information exchange and relationships between the characters. And once again, I'm talking about this as a player technique. Now, there's games out there which, through the mechanics, create or help foster relationships. There's various games where there's bonds between the characters. There's actually The Veil, good example, where we had some kind of relationship stuff that we had to fill out between the various characters. And once again, in that game, it's been really neat to see how the interactions between the characters have taken place. Where Tess was quite interested in Cadmus, and Cadmus treated her like a toaster. But that was an interesting dynamic. We had one character that was very interested in the other character, another character who was really not interested in this one much at all. Even though as players we were interested in each other's characters. There's that difference. Etc. There's a lot. Actually, Uncharted Worlds has this great move where it's called cramped quarters, where you roll to see, if you've been on a long voyage, well, are you guys getting along? Are you not getting along? And then you have to make up the details about why that happened, which I think is great. I may steal that for an OSR game sometime. Yeah, and wait till we get masks going. I'm sure that will be pretty interesting. But once again, there are games that foster that throughout the rules, or with the rules. But there's a lot of games where none of that actually happens. So how do you foster these relationships between the characters? And to me, the big thing is, as players, was two things. The first thing is we have to take our eyes off our own character sheets and off our own character and look up and become interested in the other characters. It's been my experience, over time, that often I'm more interested in the other people's characters than I am in my own. That you really start to... and sometimes what happens is you learn more stuff about your character by the impressions that the other players give you as we talk about each other's characters, off screen, when we're not playing, so to speak. When we're having the game in between the game, or the discussion in between the game sessions, which is really, really neat. And so part of that, though, is the sharing of some kind of information. Now I've talked before, a real common game master technique to have some kind of cheat sheet where you get all the information about all the characters in terms of what are their motivations or flaws or personality quirks, and then what are all their stats. Because that makes it much easier to adjudicate stuff as a game master. However, as a player, I believe that's really helpful as well. And this requires some level of information exchange between the players in terms of being willing to share details of your character sheet and things about your character with the other players. Now here's where it's funny, where I went back and looked at my old video catalog and saw that I was somewhat contradicting myself. I'm still going to stick by my assertion that no, I'm not contradicting myself. I'm widening my scope. And I think in this video about transparent versus opaque character motivations, I believe that whole video was prompted by something that Angel had said, no surprise, talking about the idea that, should we just completely lay bare all the motivations and the inner thought life and secrets and whatnot of our characters to each other, or should we reveal them in a more organic fashion, like people normally do throughout the course of their lives? The longer that you and I know each other, the more likely we are, if we interact a lot, to kind of drop stuff on each other, and we discover things about each other. I find that much more satisfying. However, at the same time, there are facets of each other's personalities which become manifestly apparent that we are able to see and figure out relatively quickly. I'm going to go in this playscape. It's kind of like, I'm like, this is kind of weird. I'm like doing the CGA thing, but without a kid. But there are things that are clear. So maybe I don't know everything about your character in terms of, what their flaws, what their goals, what their motivations, what drives them, etc. really are. But, and this is a matter of like, do you decide to share this with me or not? But there's certain aspects of your personality in real life, and I believe will help role play between the characters if we kind of share them with each other. And for the most part, I think in most games, some of the games I played with, we've done a good job with that. In our little one-shot, sometimes what's happening is we're bringing our characters at the last minute, and we're just trying to figure them out, and we're not sharing enough information with each other about all the little things that make this guy tick. Once again, doesn't have to be everything, doesn't have to be every little circumstance of their life and what have you, but giving them more, giving up more of a more of a look, more of a transparent look, or translucent. Let's say translucent. Let's say it's not just transparent and opaque character motivations, because I think that's where I was thinking at the time. But it was I'm thinking like more translucent. Let's add a third layer, where you're able to see parts of the person's personality. And that, to me, fosters a lot of role play. Likewise, to a lesser extent, knowing the other person's stats, at least where they're really, really good and where they really, really suck. That's, once again, something that you and I in the real world can kind of manifestly see in each other. And I believe that our characters should be able to see in each other as well. So, sharing some of that information where you realize, okay, well, this guy is clearly, muscle-bound, or clearly stupid, or clearly quite intelligent, or quite socially adept, or a complete idiot socially. A clumsy fool, all these kind of things. Very skilled, with little gadgets. And some of this is just the archetype, the class, if you will, every once in a while. And some of this is more of the nuances of the character. So, being really much more long-winded than I wanted to be, but the idea that we share this kind of information with each other, we become interested in the other person's character. We get a sense of who our character is, personality-wise, which, once again, I think in this group we're all doing a really good job. But it's almost like, as I stand back and look at it, it's like we're role-playing in a bubble. It's like we're passing the mic. And then, okay, I'm going to role-play my character. Now here's the mic. You role-play your character. But we're almost... What happens, and this happens a lot, I believe, we're not interacting with each other as much. This even goes down to the making all the decisions in character. When we come to these impasses, what do we do now? You get something's revealed. You come to the airport. What do we do here? Do we go to the hotel and what have you? It's really easy to slip into player talk as we discuss, strategy or what have you, as opposed to let's take this opportunity as players to make all these decisions in character. Because to me, and this may not float your boat, but it floats mine. These relationships, the interaction, the interplay between the characters is really, really satisfying. And this all happens against the backdrop of all the kind of crap I like, because I like action. So maybe you're fighting Nazis in 1936. Maybe you're just fighting trolls and orcs. Maybe you're doing some kind of investigation. Maybe you're a musketeer in Paris and there happens to be werewolves and God knows what else. But all that stuff that I really like, that I really enjoy about the role-playing game and about the premise, because I'm a sucker for a premise, it's all kind of flat and two-dimensional if there isn't relationships between the characters. And they don't necessarily have to be those, the conversations, those interactions don't necessarily have to be like campfire conversations. I think Angel quipped about that one time, where we're having these long soliloquies to each other and laying bare various things about our personalities or what have you. Doesn't have to be, like that. It could be that little scene in Jaws where Quint talks about the Indianapolis. It's kind of a campfire situation, but often with the interactions, which are just as satisfying. We have a lot of this in All for One. These little quips back and forth to each other, little digs. You think of movies like Star Wars or Raiders of the Lost Ark, and that's all they're really doing. They're not having these long conversations with each other, but you're able, as a viewer, to figure out exactly what the relationship between these characters, are. What do they think of each other? That's very apparent, and I believe, as players, we can also convey that kind of information, as we, figure out, what do these people think of each other, and then how do we express that in character? So. Yeah, that's my little rant. But I think it's kind of a technique. It's something that, when I find that it's missing, I want to correct it, and I believe most of that really is player behavior. So you share this information with each other about your character. It doesn't have to share everything. You can leave some things opaque, and then stop being so damn interested in your character. Get interested in the other people's characters, because that to me is where it gets really, really rich and exciting. And then start interacting in character with each other. And, the game, for me at that point, whatever it is, becomes far more exciting. So that's it, the end.